Sure. John, he and his wife Lucy, they owned property along what they call the Keokee Swamp, which was over in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, near the present day of Tarboro. And John was actually born not too far from there, and he was trained, or apprenticed rather, as a barrel maker growing up. And he did that for a while, even after he met and married Lucy Williams. Then eventually they ended up starting a farm there.
In North Carolina.
That's correct, in North Carolina. But that didn't last too long.
Now he was a slave owner, apparently.
Right, he was a slave owner there in North Carolina and in Tennessee.
Oh, he did bring his slaves with him to Tennessee.
2 of them.
Okay, he did. Okay, that was my next question. Let's see. How many children did John Bell have?
In all, he had 9.
Wow, 9 kids. And what year did the haunting of the Bell Witch begin? Do you remember that date? Was it 1804 or something like that?
No, the winter of 1804 to 1805 is when they moved to Tennessee after the incident in North Carolina. However, nothing happened that we know of, at least, in Tennessee until 1817.
Oh, okay. Oh, so they were there a while before anything happened.
Yeah, they were there a while. They had some more children. They bought additional land. They joined the church there. John Bell became an elder of the church. A whole lot happened before all of the disturbances hit.
Now, in everything you've read and seen about John Bell, what was he like? Do you think he was a nice guy, a bad guy, a dangerous guy, or?
Well, I think he what's the word? I think he had a lot of pride in his family and the things that they were able to accomplish. I think he was a very smart businessman. But sometimes, a couple of times, one time in particular, he had an issue of falling out with another man over a business deal that looked a little bit, to me, I would call it kind of shady, but that's just me. But he was supposedly, from what I've heard and read, just very well liked and very well respected. But at the same time, this business dispute he had, as well as a property line dispute, and the fact that he actually sued somebody because they injured one of his slaves, and he sued him for medical reimbursement, tells me he was a very hardcore businessman, I guess would be a way of putting it.
Okay. Now, tell me who Kate Batts, is that correct? Am I saying her name right?
Right, Kate Batts.
And she's the one that everybody was claiming to be the Bell Witch.
Well, ultimately they started claiming that. People were asking this entity, once it had developed a voice, who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? And every person who asked would receive a different answer, and the answer would never be correct.
Right.
Well, one time this thing came up and said that it was old Kate Batts's witch, and it was going to make John Bell die a slow and miserable death. Well, because the real lady, Kate Batts, was rather eccentric and didn't have near the money everybody else had, she was kind of looked down on, kind of like an outcast, if you will.
Okay.
And when the entity made this revelation, people were saying, oh, yeah, that's got to be true. That's it, because that lady's crazy.
Oh, okay.
So people started calling it Kate, and it even started answering to the name of Kate.
Okay. Now, did John Bell ever do anything to Kate Batts? I mean, did they ever have any kind of a connection?
No, there's been nothing whatsoever proven on that. There's also been nothing proven that they didn't.
Okay.
But the problem we have here is we get all these armchair historians coming up claiming that there was, and that means the burden of proof lies with them.
Right.
And none of these people who are saying this have ever come up with any proof that anything like that.
I know.
Happened
I've heard a lot of. I've heard a lot of different theories that he was having an affair with her, that he stole property from her, like a bad land deal or something.
Well, the affair deal, that as well as the property line deal, those are two of the biggest myths surrounding the Bell Witch legend that there's ever been. And even though I debunked those way back, with research and everything, people still go out here like crazy and just, are saying, yeah, this happened and this happened. If you want to know how all this came about with the land deal and why they are accusing her, I can let you know, but I don't know how much time we have on here.
We have plenty of time.
Okay, well, here's what happened. Two things, actually. John Bell had a property line dispute in the latter part of 1816 with a neighbor named Josiah Fort. The matter was handled by the church, as most disputes were back then, and Mr. Fort left the church and went to church somewhere else after the property line dispute. So John Bell won the dispute. Well, a year or two later, John Bell had a dispute with a man named Benjamin Batts, who was the brother-in-law of Kate Batts, over the sale of a slave. Mr. Batts claimed that Mr. Bell charged too much interest, so the matter was brought before the church, and Mr. Bell was found not guilty. Well, Mr. Batts was furious, so he took John Bell to the regular county court and filed charges there. And the court subsequently ruled against Mr. Bell. Well, because of that, Mr. Bell was excommunicated or kicked out of the church due to the fact that his legal conviction embarrassed the church, especially seeing how he was an elder. Now, if you take everything I just said, put it in a kettle and stir it up and let it simmer for over 200 years, what you get is a bunch of people saying John Bell had a falling out with Kate Batts over a property deal.
So, now what relation is Kate Batts to the other gentleman?
Kate Batts was a sister-in-law of Benjamin Batts.
Okay,
she was married to Frederick Batts, who was Benjamin's brother.
And now, was she an acquaintance with John Bell?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Okay.
This was a very small community, fewer than 100 people. I would say at the time, probably, based on census information and things like that, fewer than 50 people. So they all knew each other, plus Mrs. Kate Batts, was the daughter of John Williams, Jr., who was the brother of Lucy Bell, John Bell's wife. So therefore, Kate Batts was Lucy Bell's niece.
Oh, okay. Really? Okay.
So, there's a family tie there.
Oh, all right. So really, the connection of the Bell Witch to Kate Batts is just conjecture. It's
right.
People are just.
Well, I call it a lot more than conjecture, but I don't know what our listening audience is here. But, I'll put it this way. Based on my almost 40 years of researching this case,
right,
I am 99% positive that
anything
connecting Kate Batts with the Bell Witch legend is BS.
Okay.
I guess that's the best way I know to put it.
Now, what's your do you think that was it Andrew Jackson? Yeah.
Oh, yes, Andrew Jackson.
Do you think he actually showed up there? You think that's a true story?
It's a partial truth. We do know that Mr. Bell's oldest sons fought under Jackson in the War of 1812, and we do know that Jackson indeed owned property only a mile or two away from the Bell farm. So it was entirely possible that he visited there at some point. However, there is nothing on record anywhere stating that he encountered the Bell Witch. And in fact, there's plenty on record that shows he was away from Tennessee, like in Louisiana and Texas, during much of the time that these disturbances occurred.
Right. Because I would have to assume people of his stature kept pretty good records of their travels and where they go and where they've been.
Yes, and he did, and he wrote about it a whole lot, and he also had men who traveled with him regularly, and they wrote a lot, about their travels, things like that.
Well, I think it's something a lot of people in those days did. A lot of people kept journals of their lives.
Oh, yeah,
and
they
so
did.
It's not that uncommon.
Nowadays, we don't have time these days, but
No.
back then, a lot of people did.
Yeah, people had more free time, I guess, and so they just wrote about their day in a book somewhere. That's what they would do. And they had much better handwriting than we do today.
Oh, yeah, much better handwriting, better thought processes, better vocabulary, better everything, except for technology.
That's true. Now, what's the deal with the Bell Witch Cave?
Yeah, the Bell Witch Cave is up on the northwestern, or near the northwestern corner of the farm, or the old, what used to be the Bell Farm. And the biggest thing, well, a lot of things have happened there. It's very historic for a number of reasons. But I think the biggest thing that happened there, in my opinion, was one of the stories about Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, and her older brother and some other kids playing in the cave one day. And one of the little boys who was with them stuck his head between two rocks trying to look into a room near the back of the cave. And somehow he got his head stuck, and his neck began swelling, which made it almost impossible for him to get his head out.
Right.
And according to legend, the cave suddenly lit up, and the little boy, his head became dislodged from the rocks, and he was pulled all the way through the cave and out to the front. And then that night, when the entity known as Kate made her nightly appearance there in the Bell living room, it talked about this incident and claimed credit for pulling him out of the cave.
Huh.
So the entity saved the little boy.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. In this case, it was looking out after him.
Now, how much of this story about the Bell Witch is actually documented?
Well, there's a lot of the story that's documented in different places. There's no end to the documentation you'll find, but what you have to look at is the sources and quality of the documentation.
Right.
And also, and when I say quality, I mean how deep it goes, how much research has been done.
Right.
As far as back in the olden days, back during those days is concerned, the documentation consists primarily of the Richard Williams Bell manuscript that everybody claims they have, but yet which I've never been able to find or get anybody to produce.
Right.
And also some accounts from different families that were in the area at the time that they've handed down. Some of them have been handed down orally, and there have also been a few written accounts handed down over the years, not in terms of books, but I'm talking about in manuscripts, notations in family Bibles, and things
Right.
like that.
Okay. Now, as a paranormal investigator, have you ever done an investigation at this farm?
At Ground Zero, no, because they don't usually allow that.
Okay.
But there's a building, an old log cabin that was part of the original Bell Farm that's now at the Adams, Tennessee City Park. And I've spent a couple of nights in there. It's been a while, but spent a couple of nights
Right.
in there. And then recently a friend of mine went in there for a few minutes, and I think they brought some K2s and some
Right.
recorders in there and got some interesting voices.
Now, is the Bell Witch Cave, is that open to the public, or is that on private property also?
Well, it's on private property, but they opened it to the public for tours.
Okay.
And I think they might even have a canoe service. I'm not for sure. But you'd have to go to their website, bellwitchcave.com, to get their schedule and more information.
Okay. Now, you are involved with another project. I know you can't talk about it too much. Is there anything you can say about it? You know what I'm talking about, the show.
Oh, Lord, I'm involved with about with about 5 projects right now, or at least I've got 3 more on the way of some other things. The show you're talking about is called Cursed. Cursed the Bell Witch. It's on A&E Monday nights at 9 Central, 10 Eastern.